Hi. Today we are going to be talking about transition. My name is Alex. I'm on staff with Crew, and I've been working here at headquarters for the last couple months. But before that, I was on staff on campus in California for the last 6 years. This is Gina Butz, and she has a lot of great things for us to hear about transition. So she has actually been working with the Global Digital Strategies team and contributes to the leadership development here at Crew. She's a mom, a writer, and a blogger. She's been in full-time ministry for 22 years and overseas for 13 of those years. So she's experienced quite a bit of transition. She's lived in 10 different places during that time, and she's actually currently writing a book. So Gina, help us introduce this topic of transition. What is it? What types of transitions are there?
Yeah, transition, it's a really disruptive thing, right? I mean, it's any time when your life changes, and it could be geographical, it could be vocational, kind of, how you spend the majority of your time, whether it's your job or a role that you have. And then it's just relational too, like, you break up with someone, or, someone moves away, all those kinds of things. So, and a lot of those things don't happen in isolation. It's not like it's like, if you're a college student, it's like you just probably moved to a new place, so that's geographical, right? But then it's vocational, like it's a new thing to learn how to be a college student. And then of course it's relational because you moved away from your parents and you got to meet new people. So it's usually compounded, and I think that's what makes it such a challenge.
Yeah, totally. It's so complicated.
It is.
So we want to hear from you guys while we're doing this. We'd love for you to comment in the feed. What kind of transition are you going through? Are you starting school? Are you starting a new job? Are you getting married? So let us know. So Gina, what are some things that are important to acknowledge while you're in transition?
Yeah. I think the thing with the transition is, like, it's so unsettling, and we want to just get back to normal as quickly as possible. That like feels like the goal. Okay. But I think the reality is, if we're actually really willing to like rest in it and like kind of linger in it, I think there's some really great lessons for us in it. So I think like the simple thing of calling it hard where it's hard, right? Mm-hmm. Like, I think as Christians we tend to we only want to we'll say it's hard but it's good, right? It's right. We want to just rush to it's good, right?
Yeah.
But I think it's hard and good, right? Mm-hmm. So I think calling it hard where it's hard and saying this is really this is impacting me in this way. I think of when we were overseas, our son was 10 years old, and we had moved from one part of our city to another. So not a huge transition, but there were all these new things of a new school and figuring out new friends and new places to buy groceries and all that kind of stuff, right? So he came to me one day and he's like, "Mom, my heart is just tired of all the new things." Mm-hmm. And I was like, oh, the second he said it, I was like, yeah, you're right. That's why I'm so tired right now. I didn't realize it until he said it. But I think when we do that, when we're this is just hard. I'm tired. I feel weak. I feel confused. When we admit how it's impacting us, I think it opens a door for others to minister to us and for God to minister to us. And I think it also it allows us to extend grace and compassion to ourselves. Because otherwise, I think we kind of just try to push through and grit our teeth and get through it, But I think we really have to give ourselves permission to not be okay when we're not okay. Yeah. And sometimes we're just not okay in transition. So.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. It's really a scary thing, I think, to do. But
it is.
A needed thing, I guess.
Yeah, it can be really hard to, because, it's messy, right? Yeah. Emotions are messy, and sometimes it's easier to just numb yourself to it and pretend.
I hate messes.
You're not feeling these things. But, I think of all the emotions that are stirred up in transition, just the desire to be known, to be needed, to feel like you have a place where you can contribute, things like that. I think, when we acknowledge those things, it's painful, it's hard, and it would just be easier to escape the feelings or to numb them out and pretend they don't exist. But they're evidence that we long for things, and I think God really wants to be the satisfaction of those things. So the more we acknowledge them, I think the more God can meet us in those places.
Yeah. So how does it look to really rely on God in transition? What are some things how would you speak to them?
Yeah. I think one of the things that's important for me, like when I think about like calling it hard, I feel like there's this temptation of like, oh, am I going to start complaining or be bitter, or, if I'm focusing on all the things that are hard about transition. But I think when we do that, if we do it alongside of the fact that we know that God is sovereign and that He's good, that then we can realize, like, even if this is hard, like these hard aspects of transition are from God. Like he has brought this into my life, and that means there's purpose to it. That means that He's going to use this to shape my life. And so I think for me, like coming back to that truth and resting in that, like God is good, God is sovereign, and so I'm going to receive this, and like just to be open to receive all the hard aspects of a transition and say, okay, He'll work in this too. Yeah, I think that's important.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I feel like that sometimes could take some wrestling. Yeah, it's not like I'm just great. I'll trust God. He's good.
For sure.
For me, I'm always like, but really, all right.
Oh yeah, I remember being overseas, and our son had been born just like 6 months after we got overseas, and I remember standing on a street corner, like waiting for a taxi, and I got him strapped to my chest, and I kept waving down these taxis, and then like local guys would come and take my taxi, and I would just stand there and be like, this is a sign, this is a sign, this is like, I was like, this is part, God's gonna work this for my good, and I was like, through gritted teeth, right? But I look back and I can see how He was using that to shape my character. So I think, just really anchoring ourselves in that truth that He's brought this into our lives, and He's walking us through this new season. And I think too, a lot of transition shows us, we lose a lot of things in transition, right? And a lot of what we lose shows us where we've been finding our identity, because we lose a feeling of competence, like I know what I'm doing, like I remember when we came back to the States, sometime in the period of time that we hadn't been here, they had changed how gas stations work. And I spent like 10 minutes at a gas station one day, like, why can't I pay for my, like I was like, I don't know what I'm doing. Yeah. I'm an American, this is my country, it was so frustrating, that the sense of like, I don't know how this works. Right? But a lot of times in transition, if we move to a new city, we start a new job, we're like, I don't know how this works, right? And there's this sense of feeling lost, and then there's a sense of connection that we lose, right? Because we've lost relationships, and that's so important. We were made for relationship, and we need that, right? And so I think all of those things kind of point us to, where have I been finding identity, and where have I been looking for life and love apart from God? And it's not that those things are bad. Of course, relationships are good. Feeling competent is good. But I think it's an opportunity for God to call us back to Him and say, you know what, there's something in your life that doesn't change, and that's who I am and who I say you are. And so I think it's just a great opportunity for us to go back and say, okay, this is who God is. This is His character. His character doesn't change no matter where I am. And the fact that I'm His child and I'm His beloved, like that never changes either. So my roles might change, from one place to another. But ultimately who I really am doesn't change. So I think the practice of like really sinking deeply into those things, God's character and our identity, are really important.
Yeah.
In transition.
Yeah. That's definitely true. Something I was noticing as you're talking is it just sounds like it's important for us to zoom back and like look at a bigger picture.
Yeah.
I've been thinking about that, and as I've transitioned to Orlando from California, it's really difficult to pause and do that.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. So yeah, you've mentioned a couple instances of your transitions.
Yeah.
But yeah, is there another story that maybe we could hear about a time in your life that you were going through a big transition, and what God kind of showed you through that, or maybe how you wrestled with Him, if that's applicable?
Yeah, well, I think another thing that's really important for us to acknowledge in transition is the expectations that we have. Because a lot of times we have them, but we don't know that we have them, so right? True. So it's like we come in and we're like, I expect that I'm going to have friends, and I'm going to find a church, and I'm going to find, whatever. Like, I'm going to expect that the grocery store is the
Right.
stuff that I like, and
Totally.
I don't, and what do
Totally.
you do, you know? So I remember when we transitioned back to the U.S., you know, of course I had all these expectations, and especially for my kids and wanting them to do well and thrive. And it wasn't long into our time here I realized that I was expending a lot of energy trying to make those things happen. Like, if only I could just satisfy these needs, then we'll be happy, right? And I just felt like God was saying, you know, Gina, I see your needs and I can meet your expectations, but actually I might meet them in a way that you aren't even thinking of. And it made me realize, like, am I putting my hope in a certain way that my life is going to look, or am I putting my hope in God? And there's a difference in that, because when I put my hope in God, I'm trusting He sees me, He sees my needs, and He'll meet my needs, but maybe in a totally different way, right? And just a couple weeks ago, our pastor was talking about transition, and he referenced this verse from, I think it's Jeremiah 29:4. You can all look it up and see if I'm right. But it says, it's God speaking to the Israelites when they were exiled in Babylon. And he said to them, build houses and plant gardens and get married, which is so, like, why would you want to do that? I'm exile, right, in this place I never wanted to go to. But he's really saying, like, dig in and invest in this place that I've sent you to, right? And the idea of planting gardens, our pastor pointed out, you know, when you plant a garden in a new place, it's going to grow different fruit than the place you were in before, because this is a new season, right? And so if you're expecting that you can only be satisfied or only be, you know, satiated from what was grown before, you're going to miss what's growing here. So I think, you know, that idea of letting God meet your needs in a totally new and different way in this new season. So what I did is I wrote down all these things these expectations that I had for this season, and then I just wrote at the top, if they're going to happen, God will make them happen. And then I didn't even pray through them actually anymore, because I knew that if I started to pray through them, I would start to scheme. Like, oh, maybe I could do this, you know. And I just sit in my time with God, and I would just be like, okay, God, here are the things that we need, or I think we need. I'm just going to put them before you and, like, trust you. And it was so cool, because over time I just started to see, like, new life in these areas. And even now, like, I look back at him and go, yeah, he's doing things that, like, I weren't even on that list, right? That I, like, I never knew that he would do.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, that's cool. Thanks for sharing that. So yeah, you mentioned, like, building these roots. What does it look like to build roots, but then also to still be able to grieve? I assume there's, like, some grieving that needs to happen as you leave these old relationships and places. And
I think grief is a really important practice in transition, and it's one that we're not often inclined to do. Because I think there's a fear that if we grieve, that we are going to, like, kind of lose ourselves in it, right? But there's a difference between grief and despair, and I think people kind of put those together. But grief can really be a very healing process, and I think it's really intertwined with joy, because you know, we grieve the things that we've lost that we loved, and the more we have to grieve, it's because we lost so much that we loved, and that there's great joy in that, in knowing that you had something that you really loved. You know, whether it's a friendship or you know, a place that you loved, a job that you loved. So it honors what you lost to give it that space to grieve. But I think as we do it, I think it's important for us to also cling to God, and I think that's how we keep those roots in Him and keep ourselves anchored in Him. And I find it's really, for me, it's most helpful to do it in the practices of worship and gratitude, because they just turn my eyes off my circumstances and back onto God. And I think David's a really good example for us in that, in the Psalms, because you know, he's so honest before God, right? And he just pours his heart out to Him, and then at the same time he comes back to, but I know that you're God. Like, I know that, you know, I'm going to trust in you. So I think that's a great pattern for us to say, like, be honest before God. You know, be honest about all these things, like what you want and what desires are stirred in you and what's hard and what you're grieving, and then come back to who He is. And I think the practice of gratitude too, sometimes it's hard because it's like some transitions are really tough, and you're like, I hate all of this. You know, like,
Yes.
you know? And so I think, like, I often think of like the idea of like panning for gold. I've never panned for gold because I'm not a man in the 1840s in California. But
I actually have panned for
see,
gold.
have you? So
when I was a
this
kid,
is great.
because I'm from
So
California.
you can tell me if this is true or not.
All right.
So I just imagine, you know, of course, like there might be times when there's like, oh, obvious big chunks of gold, right? Great, you know. But from what I understand, you have to look hard, right? Because there might just be these little flecks of gold. And so I think gratitude can be like that in a hard space where you just you look and look, like, as you know, you're looking for like the littlest thing, and you go, okay, see, here's God at work, and here's God at work. And the more you see it, like, you pretty soon you've accumulated a good amount of gold dust, right?
Yeah.
And I think it trains your heart to look for, what is God doing?
Right.
How is He restoring the things that I've lost?
Yeah.
So I think that you know, a friend of mine once told me in transition, he said, you got to count your losses, and then you count your gains, and then you focus on your gains.
Yeah.
So I think that's really what God calls us to do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, is there any other little, I guess, nuggets of? I think she doesn't like that word. Yeah.
No, everybody knows they use it against me.
Yeah. Any other pieces of advice that you'd want to let somebody know?
Yeah.
As they experience transition and move through that.
Yeah. I think the thing is, I think the more that we're honest in transition about how it's impacting us, even in negative ways, you know, we're telling people like where it's hard. I think it's important to share with other people, you know, to let them into your process. And there will be people who know exactly what you're going through, you know, and they can walk really well with you. So I would encourage people who are in transition to be vulnerable and willing to say, like, I'm not okay. This is hard, and this is where I'm struggling. This is what I don't understand. This is where I feel like my needs aren't being met. And I think the more that we do that and allow other people to come in and minister to us, I think it grows our ability to be gracious and compassionate with others, so that we can be the ones who walk well with others when they're going through something too. I think too, I would say that the more that we are willing to be really wholehearted in transition, to like absolutely throw ourselves into the practices of worship and gratitude, and really like look to God and let Him be our strength, while we also are acknowledging what's really challenging about transition, I think it keeps our hearts open. And I think that's really our desire. So I think about how easy it can be for us, like, because transition can be hard, it can be easy for us to learn ways to self-protect and kind of pull back and protect, you know, so it doesn't hurt so much the next time, right? But I think of, like, you know, last year we were overseas, we met a couple, and like the second they moved to our city, we were like, oh, we like them and we want to hang out with them and be friends with them, right? But we knew that we were probably going to move back to the States in a year. So I went to a friend of mine and I was like, we really like them, but I feel like we should tell them that we're leaving so they like don't invest in us, right? And she looked at me and she's like, don't you dare. She said, you just be friends with them, and if it means a hard goodbye, then that's what it means. But don't hold back from investing just because you know. So we didn't, and we just, they were great friends, and when we told them that we were leaving, it was horrible, but and saying goodbye at the airport was horrible. But you know what, like, they're lifelong friends, right? And we got together with them this summer, and it was like no time has passed, and so even though there was grief, again, there's so much joy in knowing them. So I think to me that's just an example of how I want to be in transition. Like, I just want to be open to, it might be hard, but God is in this and it's good. So just be wholehearted in it.
Yeah, that makes sense a lot. Yeah, it sounds like it's like if you try to stunt your grief in a way, you also end up maybe stunting your joy.
You do, because you can't selectively numb a part of your heart. That's just not how hearts work.
Sadly, you can't just turn that off.
Just gonna shut off that scary and stuff and the sad stuff.
If only.
I would say one more thing too. I think I think, transition can really bring us to places of weakness. But that's just a great opportunity for God to be our strength. And so I think sometimes our tendency is like, oh, I'm just going to this is God proving how strong I am. I'm going to buck through. It's like, no, God knows exactly how strong you are, and it's not as much as you think you are. So
Right.
He's not bringing you to this place to prove how strong you are. He's bringing you to a place of weakness so that you depend on Him. So I think there's a great opportunity in transition too, to just say, okay, God, I'm weak, I'm helpless, I need you, please help me.
Yeah.
And to see greater depths of His resources in that.
Yeah. Cool. Well, let's pray for those in transition. I can start and you can.
Yeah, absolutely.
God, Lord, thank you that you don't change in our transition, that you're constant and that you are good, even when we struggle to see that. God, I pray that you would help all of us that are in transition, and we probably all are in some transition. So, yeah, Lord, would you guide us, and would you help us to stay open and vulnerable with you and with others, so we would invite others in. Yeah, God, thank you that you never leave us or forsake us.
Yeah, God, I too am thankful that you don't change, and that who we are in your eyes does not change either. I thank you for the transitions that you bring us through, and what a gift they are to us, to be such a transformational tool in your hands, to make us more like you and to help us see where we are looking outside of you for our strength or our hope. Thank you for how you can use these times to call us back to you. And I pray that for the people who are watching, who are in transition, that they would be called back to you, that they would be willing to be honest about what's happening in their hearts, and at the same time just anchor themselves in you and who you are, and knowing that you love them, that you have grace and compassion for them. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. Well, thanks for joining us and talking about transition. Be sure to check out Gina's blog at Gina Butz, BUTZ.com /transition, and you can hear more about that topic from her.
Yep.
So thanks for listening. Bye.